Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. Malaysia. Malaysia is a country made up of various British colonies that came together as a federation and then became an independent country. Britain started establishing colonies in the region in the late 1700s. The two main areas include the western colonies on the Malay Peninsula and the eastern colonies on the island of Borneo. The western settlements were part of the Malay Peninsula, which included the colonies of Penang and Singapore. Eventually, the British took control of the eastern colonies of Brunei, Sarawak, and Sabah on the island of Borneo. In 1957, the western colonies on the mainland peninsula broke from their British colonizers and became an independent country called the Federation of Malaya. They call themselves the Federation of Malaya. In 1963, the British Borneo colonies of Sarawak and Sabah joined the Federation of Malaya to form the current country, which is called Malaysia. In 1965, Singapore broke off from Malaysia and became an independent country. Brunei, which was still a British protectorate, became independent in 1984. Malaysia has two main land areas separated by the South China Sea. The regions of Sarawak and Sabah on the island of Borneo are called East Malaysia. The mainland on the Malay Peninsula is called West Malaysia. These regions have similar physical landscapes, which include coastal plains with nearby densely forested foothills and mountains. The highest mountain, rising 13,436 feet, are in East Malaysia on the island of Borneo. Located near the equator, Malaysia has a tropical climate with monsoons regularly occurring from October to February. About 2/3 of Malaysia is covered in forest, with a variety of animals and plants, many of which live in the forests of Borneo's mountains. Diversity of culture and ethnicity in Malaysia. Malaysia's culture is diverse, in that several major religions are practiced within its borders. Islam is considered the official religion and is supported by at least 60% of the population. About 20% of the people are Buddhists. 10% are Christians, and 6% are Hindu. The remaining percentages of the population include traditional Chinese religions and local tribal beliefs. In this Islamic country, there are concerns that Muslims get preferential treatment by government programs and policies. There are even special judicial legal courts for Muslims only to work out issues regarding marriage, custody, inheritance, or other conflicting Islamic issues regarding faith and obligation. This court only hears Islamic issues and no other legal matters. There have been movements by minority extremist groups that would like to see Malaysia shift toward a true Islamic state, complete with the Sharia criminal code as the law of the land. The people of Malay ethnic background make up more than 50% of the population. People of Chinese descent are the second largest group at about 24%. An additional 11% of the population is made up of indigenous groups. During British colonialism, a number of people from South Asia were brought to Malaysia. For example, Tamils were brought from India to work the plantations. Their Hindu beliefs were infused into the culture, and some Tamils also converted to Christianity. Sheiks were also brought from South Asia to help Britain run the country as police, soldiers, or security officers. The sheiks who came brought their religion with them, which added to the multi-religious dynamic of the country. Malaysia's diverse ethnic and cultural mix often results in strong centrifugal forces that push and pull on the societal dynamics of the country. China has been active in the business community and has established strong economic ties with regional countries that have Chinese populations. The single largest minority group in the province of Sarawak on Borneo is Chinese. As a minority group, the Chinese citizens of Malaysia have felt discrimination. Since the official language is Malay and the official religion is Islam, there have been concerns about discrimination against all minority groups. Working through the cultural and ethnic diversity has been a major challenge for the country. Each minority religious or ethnic group desires to celebrate its own special holidays. For example, there's the usual New Year's celebration on January 1st, And then there's the traditional 15-day Chinese New Year celebration, celebrated at a different time of the year. Sikhs celebrate the Sikh New Year. Buddhists celebrate a holiday in honor of the life and enlightenment of Buddha. Christians celebrate Christmas and Easter. Many other holidays of significance are respected or honored by various minority groups. Economic development in Malaysia. Malaysia has rapidly advanced its economy in recent decades and is modernizing its infrastructure: roads, bridges, highways, and urban facilities. In the capital city of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia has built a modern central business district with twin high-rise office buildings claimed to be the world's tallest at the time of construction. The country has been a leader in the export of natural resources such as tin, rubber, and palm oil, and has developed its agricultural and extractive sectors to gain income. Indonesia. The country of Indonesia is the world's largest archipelago state, consisting of more than 17,500 islands, about one-third of which are inhabited. Indonesia is the 16th largest country in the world by area. The combined area of all the islands and regions of Indonesia would equal about the size of the country of Mexico. The country shares land borders with Borneo and with the Borneo side of Malaysia, the western half of the island of Timor, and the western portion of the island of New Guinea, which is shared with the country of Papua New Guinea. The country's location, on both sides of the equator, provides a tropical climate, complete with a monsoon season. Average rainfall can vary from 70 to 240 inches per year. The highest mountain is in West Papua and rises to about 16,024 feet. Indonesia is located on the Pacific Rim, where tectonic plate activity produces earthquakes and volcanic activity. The country is home to over 150 active volcanoes, including two of the most famous ones, Krakatoa and Tambora. Indonesia's seismic and volcanic activity is among the world's highest. Both had devastating eruptions in the past 2 centuries. One of the most violent volcanic explosions ever recorded in human history came from Krakatoa, which is located between the islands of Java and Sumatra. A series of eruptions in 1883 were heard as far away as the coast of Africa. Shockwaves reverberated around the globe 7 times. Ash erupted into the atmosphere to a height of about 50 miles. The official death toll was 36,417, but estimates from local sources place it as high as 120,000. Global temperatures fell by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and the weather patterns were disrupted for the next 5 years. Krakatoa remains active. Over the past few decades, the volcanic peak has been growing at an average rate of about 5 inches per week. The tropical climate and the archipelago nature of the country provide for enormous biodiversity within the environment. Second only to Brazil in its biodiversity, Indonesia is host to an enormous number of unique plants and animals. The habitats of many of these creatures are being encroached upon by human activity. The remote islands have more of a chance of escaping habitat devastation and remaining intact, but agricultural and extractive economic activities have converted much of the natural environment into a cultural landscape that is not conducive to environmental sustainability. Animals, such as orangutans, are losing their natural forests and may become extinct if current trends continue. The timber industry has brought about devastation. Slash-and-burn agriculture has destroyed forest habitation, and human development patterns such as roads and urbanization have altered the ecosystem of the region. According to recent reports, Indonesia is one of the largest emitters of carbon dioxide in the world because of the high number of forest fires set each year. In 2009, the United States brokered a deal with Indonesia to forgive $30 million of its debt if the country would work to protect forests on the island of Sumatra, which is home to endangered indigenous animals such as tigers, elephants, rhinos, and orangutans. In 2010, the estimated population of Indonesia was about 245 million. Indonesia has the fourth largest population of any country in the world after the United States, India, and China. Indonesia also has more Muslims than any other country in the world. More than half the population of Indonesia lives on Java, the island where Jakarta, the capital city, is located. Java is the most populous island in the world and has a population density of more than 2,400 people per square mile. Java is the size in area of the United States state of Louisiana. Java has 135 million people, whereas Louisiana has only 4.5 million people. Jakarta is a world-class city that is larger than New York City and encompasses a large metropolitan area, complete with many manufacturing centers, business complexes, and housing districts. The many islands of Indonesia are home to a large number of diverse ethnic and religious groups that vary as widely as any Southeast Asian nation. There may be as many as 300 different and distinct ethnic groups in Indonesia. Many of the ethnic groups are further divided by islands or distance. More than 250 separate languages and hundreds of additional dialects are spoken. There are an estimated 750 languages spoken on the island of New Guinea itself, with hundreds of them spoken on the Indonesian side of the island in a population of less than 3 million. The most prevalent language group in the country as a whole is Javanese, which is spoken by about 42% of the population. Javanese includes the official language of Indonesian, which is taught in schools and used in business and politics as the lingua franca of the country. Many people speak more than one language, or even a number of languages, to communicate throughout the country. Indonesian cuisine is one of the most diverse, vibrant, and colorful in the world, full of intense flavors. Many regional cuisines exist, often based upon indigenous culture and foreign influences. Rice is the leading staple food. Spices like chili, coconut milk, fish, and chicken are important ingredients. Some exotic meats consumed in Indonesia are frog legs, horse meat, turtle, monitor lizard, fruit bat, dog, and field rats. A few cultures in Indonesia eat insects like grasshoppers, termites, bees, and the larvae of sago palm weevils. However, insects are not a popular food ingredient, nor widely available as street food, unlike Thailand. Islam was diffused to Indonesia in the 13th century, and by the 16th century had become the dominant religion. The Indonesian constitution allows for religious freedom, although more than 85% of the population follows Islam. There are at least 4 other religions that are officially recognized: Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. Since Islam is followed by such a large percentage of the population, the other religions do not carry the same influence. Regional and ethnic differences play a role in the varied religious dynamics. The island of Bali, for example, is home to a majority Hindu population. Most of the Buddhists are ethnically Chinese, and they only make up a small percentage of the population. Christians and Muslims have had conflicts on the island of Sulawesi. It is common to find the practice of these religions less than orthodox in the more rural communities of the country. In spite of the diversity within the population, the country of Indonesia has established a substantial degree of nationalism as a centripetal force that holds the country together. There is a relatively high degree of stability in spite of the surface tensions or ethnic and religious conflicts that may erupt. As an example of the social tensions is demonstrated in the case of Chinese citizens of Indonesia, which only make up about 1% of the population, but impart a substantial influence over the privately owned business sector of the economy. This seemingly inequitable relationship has resulted in considerable resentment by other portions of the population, often with violent results. The many islands have become natural divisions between cultural groups. Some of the islands, or portions of them, have attempted to break away in a devolutionary manner and become independent countries. Just as East Timor became independent, the most western province of Aceh, on the island of Sumatra, had a similar movement toward independence. West Papua, on the island of New Guinea, has also had an independence movement. The Aceh situation was negotiated out, while the West Papua movement has been suppressed by military and political forces. Many of the islands possessed large amounts of natural resources, so the country of Indonesia does not want to lose those national assets that could prove valuable in gaining wealth for the future. It is not easy to create national unity with such a diverse population scattered throughout such a large archipelago. Agriculture has been the historic base of the Indonesian economy. In 2010, it accounted for about 13% of the nation's gross domestic product. Agriculture is the largest employment sector, approximately 42% of the workforce. This equates to more than half the population being rural. Many of the agricultural methods in rural areas are traditional. For example, farmers use water buffalo or oxen for tilling their land. The tropical climate and adequate rainfall provide for multiple crops of rice per year in many areas. Spices, coffee, tea, palm oil, rice, and rubber are also produced in substantial quantities. The political background of Indonesia is similar in dynamics to many of its neighbors. Colonized by Europeans, Indonesia was previously called the Dutch East Indies, which explains why the islands of the Caribbean were called the West Indies. The Dutch colonized Indonesia in the early 17th century, but had to relinquish possession of the archipelago to the Japanese in World War II. In 1945, after the Japanese surrendered, Indonesia declared its independence, which was finally granted in 1949 after much negotiation. The country's government quickly moved toward authoritarian rule. During a 50-year time period, there were only two authoritarian rulers, Sukarno and Suharto. Near the end of Sukarno's rule, there were violent conflicts between Sukarno's military and the Communist Party of Indonesia, which resulted in more than 500,000 deaths. Suharto's regime was credited for substantial economic growth, but was also accused of serious corruption and the repression of opposition political voices. Since 1999, Indonesia has conducted free parliamentary elections and is now considered the third largest democracy, after India and the United States.